So here we are again, the Wii U. After all of the arguing and fighting, we all finally got some real information from Nintendo instead of random information from random websites that quite possibly knew just as much about the console as we all did. In other words, nothing. So with that said, is this console really worth it? Is it? Trick question. Some will say yes, some will say no. For me, it's more of a yes, but not yet. The titles I'm looking for aren't out yet, but I know they're coming. And when they do, that's when I'll get the console. But that's not the point. The real question now, again, is, can this console really be a success now that we have more information about it? Well, a while back I made a video over the Wii U. This video was my assumption as to what Nintendo's gonna do, as well as what I thought Nintendo had to do. I then split Nintendo's job into 3 groups, or rather, fans. One group was the guaranteed group, aka the Nintendo fanbase. The other 2 groups, however, were the not-so-guaranteed groups, aka the casual fanbase and the hardcore PlayStation/Xbox fanbase. What made Nintendo's job so easy with the Nintendo fanbase is that they were already expected to like the new console, as it was in fact the new generation Nintendo. So Nintendo's job was already completed with this fanbase the second they announced the Wii U, or for some people when the information was leaked. But then that's when I started to see a problem. With the Nintendo fanbase already on lock, they now wanted to try and do something rather risky. They wanted to pull in 2 different fan bases, both with the exact opposite idea of what gaming was all about. One fanbase saw gaming as nothing more than an event used in what little spare time they had due to other things they had to worry about or simply not caring enough about gaming to turn it into a long-time hobby. But the other group? Anything but that, which puts Nintendo into a bit of a tough spot. Here we are now with 2 opposite fan bases. Now, I always assumed that the $300 Wii U was for the casual fan base and the $350 was for the hardcore fan base. One of the biggest complaints after we got some real information about this console was how much storage the console had by default. This is of course assuming that the hardcore group that Nintendo's trying to bring in all go for the 350 model. To me at this point, talking about all of the hardware specs means nothing, and if anything proves that we truly are entering a generation of same graphics, different style of play. We know that the Wii U isn't that much more powerful than the Xbox 360 or the PS3. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just how things are turning out. It also explains why everything said about the Wii U in our community has come down to specs. It proves that the days of new consoles becoming twice as powerful, at least visually, are over. It tells us that we can no longer show better graphics, so instead it has to be explained through hardware. Let's face it, if your main argument is hardware over visuals, i.e. console A has better graphics than console B not because of the visuals of the game, but due to console A's hardware, then the graphics argument at this point is pretty much dead. If one was to ask, what has better graphics, the N64 or the PS2? No one would explain the hardware because they don't have to. They would simply show the difference. 64, PS2, any questions? However, if someone asks, what's more powerful, the PS3 or the Wii U? Well, visually that tactic won't work, as someone saying PS3, Wii U, any questions doesn't actually work, does it? So instead, we now have to break down everything to specs. And I think that's where the Wii U's problem could start for a specific fan base. It's true that as time goes on, better looking games will come out. But remember, in the console war, time can be your worst enemy. If Nintendo is serious about this, they better hurry. Because as of right now, graphics will not be what brings most of the 360 and PS3 fan base to the console. And remember, that's one of the main fan bases that Nintendo's going after this time. And that's actually where the real issue lies at the moment. The biggest problem I see is that Nintendo hasn't actually given the PlayStation or Xbox fan base a real reason to buy this console yet. And no, I'm not referring to people who simply say the Wii U is bad due to their hatred for the company or the company's fan base. Those people only make up a small portion of the gaming community. I'm referring to the people that have 360s or PS3s because they truly do like the games on those consoles and didn't like the Wii because of the games, or the controller just simply wasn't for them. What exactly has Nintendo done to make those people say, I think I will try this one out? As far as the controller goes, they fixed that. But what about the games? My guess is that Nintendo's going to rely on getting the casuals first. As I said in my other video, I think they'll be more difficult to get. Most new generation hardcore gamers seem to be interested in 2 things, graphics and shooters. Thus, Nintendo's job for those gamers really won't be that difficult. And in a way, they're somewhat off on the right start. Somewhat. So this battle won't start off with who has the best graphics, it'll be who has the right exclusive shooter. And while Call of Duty has taken over as the top shooter, it did so as a multiplat, which as of right now puts the top exclusive shooter in the hands of Microsoft. Now, I'm not one who can predict the future, but how many of you believe that Zombie U will beat a game like Halo 4? Nintendo has some heavy competition right off the bat. Now, that's not to say that Zombie U is a bad game, but against Halo, I don't know. And to make things worse, Nintendo's biggest competition won't even be against consoles of its generation. And since a lot of people see graphics as something that makes a game hardcore, I think the Wii U will start off struggling against the PS3 and 360. A game like The Last of Us is showing us that PS3 is far from done. Halo 4 is showing that there's still a reason to play the 360, but Zombie U is showing that the Wii U will have hardcore games. And that's what'll make it so difficult for Nintendo. They now have to prove the exact same thing to Sony and Microsoft's fanbase that was already proven by Sony and Microsoft at the start of the 7th generation, that their console is in fact for the hardcore gamer. And then there's the third-party support. Remember guys, in order for the Wii U to get the better version of something, the developers have to favor that console. Otherwise, they'll get put into the better hardware, worst version group. PlayStation gamers can tell you all about that. And if that happens, then we'll know that developers are really waiting for either the new PlayStation or Xbox. And if that actually happens, it puts the Wii U into the same situation as the Wii, except without the guarantee of the casual fan base. The problem wouldn't be so much that it's the weakest console, but that so many developers are just simply ignoring it. Because as we've all seen, the only thing worse than getting a bad port is not getting the game at all. And when it comes to a new console, the last thing we want here is an 8th generation console to get the leftovers of the 7th generation console. We now know, at least with Call of Duty, that isn't happening, so that's some good news. Now we just have to hope that the other developers will be as generous. As some of you know, EA is already starting to make Nintendo's job difficult. We'll know as time goes on how developers truly feel about the Wii U based on the third-party support. They do have some third-party games already, but we need to see how it works when a new popular third-party game comes out. And because of that, I believe that if Nintendo's going to truly win the third-party war, so to say, then they have to get the developers to favor the Wii U over the PS3 and 360. It may be difficult, but not impossible, especially since Nintendo now has an ace up their sleeve called the Wii U Pro Controller, thus not forcing the developers to add a theme based on a controller they don't like. I wish I could say that was the only problem I see here, but the other one has more to do with Nintendo trying to bring in two completely different types of gamers and trying to get both groups to feel that the console is in fact for them. How exactly do you advertise a console to the casual fan base without chasing the hardcore fan base away, and vice versa? What made a lot of people feel that the Wii was for casuals was because most of the time when Nintendo would show people playing it, they normally showed a family playing. But in that case it was quite obvious that Nintendo wanted that. But what about now? Can they still bring in the casual market while also getting the hardcore to get it as well? When a lot of new gamers this generation say hardcore games, they're pretty much saying more first-person shooters please. And first-person shooters seem to be the easiest genre to use to show off graphics. Hell, graphics alone was what made Crysis so popular. Plus the games that Nintendo themselves make normally don't pull in the same type of fan base. This stuff is made specifically for the people that are already fans of Nintendo's games. This stuff is what Nintendo will need to bring in the other fan base of these consoles. And since Nintendo doesn't make these types of games, they're going to be relying a lot on other developers to bring in the other fan base. The success of the Wii U for the hardcore fan base won't be based on Nintendo's actions, but the developers that already showed that they didn't like Nintendo's style. I really hope Nintendo has a plan. And if they really expect to win the 8th generation, whatever their plan is, needs to be executed before Sony and Microsoft's consoles evolve. It's going to be hard enough in this situation for Nintendo to compete against consoles one generation below them, but it may end up being impossible to achieve their goal of bringing in the fan base that they originally wanted. That's not to say that the console itself would fail, but that Nintendo's main goal with the console might. They've really got their work cut out for them this time. This may be the craziest console war ever. A company that's trying to steal the hardcore fan base from a company that's trying to steal the casual fan base. And a company that's showing us that they are far from done. And nothing at this point is guaranteed. Nintendo's throwing the first punch. And they better hit. Because neither Microsoft nor Sony has put their dukes down yet. And if any one of them counters the right way, Nintendo might not be able to get back up.